I am so excited. Last year, I interviewed a director from Hollywood, and today I interviewed a producer. I literally had a fangirl moment when she agreed to be on the podcast. She is this badass producer, a podcast host, and an organizational coach. Hello, everybody. You are listening to another episode of the podcast Rise and Tell with Sheekha. I am joined today by an exhilarating woman who has proved that you don't have to be amazing from day one to get something. You don't have to be a pro. You can learn on the job and you can have the zeal and the motivation to get things done. She proved everyone wrong by being the best in her field and by proving that nothing is impossible. My guest today is Capella Fahoome. She is an award winning producer, actor, a podcast host, and an organizational coach. Capella hosts the podcast When Is Now, which revolves around leadership and how leaders empower others. She holds double master's degree and she has been nominated and won a lot of awards. She is filled with kindness. Films include Don't Stop Believing, Every Man's Journey, Lost in Moonsocket, Motherland. Her energy is unmatched. And Capella is interesting because she grew up in Detroit, and in spite of being super successful as a producer and a coach, she still thinks she's that little girl from Michigan. You are in for an action packed and amazing podcast episode filled with kindness and a lot of fun stuff. So stay tuned and keep watching. Thank you so much, Capella, for being on our show. How are you?
So how are you?
Not too bad. Thank you for asking. Okay, I am so curious to know everything about you, your success, and what made you you. First of all, I should tell you I am honored. I am honored to have you as a guest on our podcast, Capella. So thank you so much for being on the show. And with that, I will start with my first question to you.
Okay.
How difficult was it for you to get into storytelling and movie making industry?
Mm, that's a great question. Well, first, thank you for having me. I am honored to be here, truly. I'm humbled that you reached out, that you know my work, and that you wanted to have a conversation, and that you think your listeners would also be interested in that conversation. So thank you. So I'm from Detroit. I'm pretty, I'm pretty loud about this upbringing and this journey. I'm from Detroit, East Side, all Detroit public school educated. Nothing ever really came easy to me. My brothers, like they were the kind of people that would pick up a golf club and like have a perfect swing, or pick up a baseball bat and have a perfect swing. Like that was not me. I was the opposite of that. Like everything I did, I had to work really, really hard, and I usually still failed, but it always led me to something better. Like the one overarching theme in my life is rejection is a universe's protection, because every single time I got rejected, which in filmmaking, as a film producer, as a human, it's very fast and furious sometimes, something better came. It was always for something better, a trillion%. Sometimes very small, sometimes super big, sometimes the next day, sometimes in the next decade, like truly. So I went to University of Michigan, majored in psychology. Like that was what I knew I wanted to do. Then I knew I wanted to work in the workplace. Like I wanted to make the workplace better. So there was a field called industrial organizational psychology, and I did horrible on my GREs, right? So to get into a graduate school, I had to find a graduate school that did not require GREs because my scores were so bad. And the only schools that I really found that had this particular program and didn't require GREs, they do now, is University of Baltimore and a school in Florida. And now I'm coming from Detroit. So I was like, I don't want to go to Florida. It's something that seemed like a little far to me, but I'll do Baltimore. So packed up my stuff and I go to Baltimore. So I'm in this program and I'm just doing fine. I'm doing my thing. And I was bartending because everybody knows that's the most money you're going to make with a psych degree. And so I would let everybody know within 5 feet, like a 5 foot rule. Anyone I know within 5 feet, like I'm looking for a job. My degree is, in psychology, but people like me and I learn quick and I'm determined and blah, blah, blah. And so finally I talked to somebody. He goes, I do know someone who's hiring, bring me your resume. So it was a production company. And that's how I got into film. The owner was a woman. She was wonderful. She brought me on as a salesperson. And then everyone in that organization just taught me. Like, honestly, Sheekha, like people would call and they would say, I need a proposal for time code burn-ins. And I'd be like, no problem. I'll call you right back. And then I had no clue what a time code burn-in is. So I would run upstairs to the control room and I would ask like one of the technicians, like, what's time code burn-in? And they would say, see those numbers running at the bottom of the screen? That's time code burn-in. And I was like, got it. So then I run downstairs and I would ask my associate who was in the office next to me, like, how much are time code burn-ins? And she's like, such and such an hour. And that's still to this day, girl, how I move around the industry. Because when I speak to students, this is the longest answer ever. When I speak to students, I always tell them, like, I can come to you today and we can talk about ideation or distribution or top tier film festivals or financing or budgeting and scheduling. We can talk about those things. But the truth is, like, at the rapid pace of technology in which it moves and what's happening today, by the time I'm finished with my talk, things will change. But what won't change is relationships and how we treat each other. So if you build relationships in the industry, then you'll always have the latest and greatest information on streaming. You'll always have the latest because you have someone that you can call that
Correct.
like trusts you and knows that you will do anything for them and they'll do anything for you, and just genuine, true connections where people care about each other. So that's what I always give them the choice. I say, look, we can talk about that technical stuff if you want. We can talk about the benefits of taking care of each other. And they always want to talk about taking care of each other.
Wow, that is so inspiring. Okay, so I have seen so many people, they excel at whatever field they are in because they have a knack for it or they're good at it. But
Mm.
you proved everybody wrong because you learned on the job while doing it. And now you're just amazing. That is
It's
commendable,
still
Capella.
learning.
That's awesome. So I want to know more. Did you ever feel like giving up because you're like, I'm getting this call, they're asking me about something, I have no clue what that is? And did that stop you ever?
I mean, you always kind of feel like giving up, right? You just don't. It's like I've ran 3 marathons, but I'm not a runner. Like, let me make that clear. I am not a runner, but I have run 3 marathons. And the only difference is you just like you wanna stop. On mile 1, you're like, "This is some bull. I don't wanna do this. Like, why am I doing this? This is crazy." But the only difference is you just keep putting one foot in front of the other. That's it. You just don't stop putting one foot in front of the other. That's the only way you finish a marathon because you wanna stop at every step. You wanna stop. It's bull. I don't know why anyone does it, but I did it and I'm proud. So, yes, it can get hard, and I'll tell you one of my favorite stories of rejection. So as a filmmaker, we're constantly like trying to get someone's name attached to our project. We're trying to get financing. We're trying to get a fellowship. We're trying to get into a lab. We're trying to get into a film festival, constantly asking, right? So you're going to get turned down a million times. It's just the name of the game. And so one thing I always say to people, if you have to enjoy the journey. It's like my stories are coming too fast and furious. So I learned this. I'm going to tell you one story. I'll try to make it brief. You learn that life is not these milestones. They aren't, because they happen too far and few. Your first house, meeting your soulmate, having your first baby, getting the job of your dreams, paying off debt. All those are great. But all right, I'll be all right when I close on this house, even though it's 3 months away. So you're waiting and you're going to be okay when you close on this house. No, like you're okay right now. And actually, this journey up to closing the house is very exciting and it should be savored every moment, not just spending the days looking to close the house in 3 months. And that hit me many years ago when I did a film called Don't Stop Believing Every Man's Journey. And it was about the 80s group Journey. This film was so, I'm sorry if I'm yelling,
No,
listeners.
I love it. I love it.
This film was so hard. And we believed in it so much. There was three of us. Um, the director, Ramona Diaz, wonderful. She was also a producer. Josh Green was my other producing partner. And it was basically the three of us. And we believed in this so much and we worked so hard. And it was so hard to find funding. And one reason was because what was happening in society at the time, it was 2008, the housing bubble burst and everything was crashing and no one was like handing out money for movies, but we just kept going. So this went on for 6 years. All I wanted to do was finish this film. Like I felt when I had finished this film, I had made it. I thought there was going to be offers. Like I wasn't going to be able to answer the phone fast enough. There was going to be like so many offers. Do you want to produce this? Do you want to produce that? It was all going to happen after this film premiered.
Right.
So I mean, the whole 6 years, I'm boom, 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 waiting, working towards this milestone, finishing this film. And honestly, and it did have a great premiere. Like we got accepted into Tribeca. They did it up. Big gala premiere, red carpet. My best friends, my family was there. The press was off the hook. It had an after party that was like hosted by Grey Goose or something. Like it was everything it was supposed to be. Right, New York City. Thursday night, which I guess is the big party night in New York. Um, and the next morning, do you know, I woke up feeling so lonely, almost like this sort of like monkey that was on my back for 6 years that had become my best friend, but I didn't realize it, was
Yeah.
gone. Like
No.
you almost wake up and you're like a little purposeless, right? And I hear this from a lot of filmmakers. This is pretty normal, but I didn't know it at the time because this was the biggest film I had produced. So we went on the whole tour and everything. And my mom and dad came with me the whole time. Like we were in Traverse City, we were in New York, we were in DC and San Francisco. And my mom and dad came with me the whole time. And then my mom organized this kind of hometown screening at my old middle school, had been turned into a independent movie house. And so we did it and blah, blah, blah. And it was great. And then finally, like it was over. It was at the distributors, like in their hands. It was over. Like, shoo. And then my mom passed away. And the last time I saw her was at that screening. And so what it made me realize is it was not like, it wasn't for the finish line. It was for the journey. Literally, pun intended. Like it was for the journey. It was for the work every day. It was for all those film festivals with my mom and dad. It was for the journey. It was not for the finish line. And so that's in every aspect of our life. We can't, and that's when I came up with the when is now.
Right.
When is always now. It's not when you do this or when you do that. Like when is now.
Oh, that was awesome. Thank you. And I'm so sorry, Capella. You had to go through that. Um, but that's inspiring. Kudos to you for putting in all the hard work and all the work that went into it. And 6 years is a very long
So long.
time.
But honestly, Shika, it's like that is honestly about what any independent film takes. It truly does. Like anytime you see independent film, unless someone came to them with a ton of money and was like, here, make a film, it takes about 6 years.
Wow. I had no idea.
Hmm.
And it's just 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and that's it.
Hmm.
Wow. 6 years. That's shocking, in fact. Wow. Okay. So, my next question, you spoke about rejection and you spoke about how you reached at this point through networking and everything. Now, tell me something about the stories. What
Mm.
kind of stories draw you in, and what's Capella's type?
So I have a workshop. I'm sure you know. I'd love you to join. It's called Working Title. And we walk people through their lives through the lens of filmmaking, right? So we establish 3 acts. Like for me, my act is Detroit, Baltimore, LA. Those are my 3 acts. We establish lighting, wardrobe. For instance, my 3rd act, my wardrobe was sweatpants, like sweatpants. And then when I sat and wrote it down, I'm like, hold up, this really what we're doing? Like, no, get out of the sweatpants and let's get our wardrobe game tight. And we look at locations, props, cast, the people that are surrounding us. In the 3rd act, I ask you, this was up on a screen right this second. What would the audience be yelling at you? What would they be yelling at? I was on a phone with my girlfriend last night and I just asked myself that. I was like, the answer is right here. Like the audience is yelling something at me. Tune in. Like I felt like the answer, almost like Dorothy in the ruby slippers. She had the answer all along. And then the last thing we do is we ask, who's our audience? Like who's watching us, right? So it's not just the obvious, our kids, our parents, our spouses. It's the person at Starbucks. It's the driver next to us. We're influencing, impacting, and informing 24/7. So my question is, how are we impacting, influencing, and informing? Are we bringing ourselves when we enter a room, a conversation? Is it energized? Does it become more fun?
Right.
Are people happy to see you? Or do you like suck all the energy out of the room? So to answer your question, what you said, what kind of story do I like? A girl, a
Yeah, what
real
is your
one,
type?
a real one, a real one. And I believe truly that as people or humans or leaders or followers, we have to integrate all pieces of our story. So now that I'm doing consulting or I'm doing facilitating, that doesn't mean I'm no longer a waitress, a daughter, an auntie, a film producer. You really integrate all of your experiences
Cool.
to bring your best to every situation, to bring the best out of people. That's the story I love, the story that you bring the best out of the people around you.
So I've noticed that almost all of your movies and documentaries and all of your stories have this huge impact, and it revolves around all of the social setup and real stuff, like the real deal. Have you met someone or have you met anybody around you who was really influenced by all of the stories that you put out? If yes, who were they and how did it affect them?
I guess you never know. There's a TED Talk called The Lollipop Moment. And basically, the person telling the story says he gave a lollipop to a woman in line and then he didn't think about it and he left. 20 years later, something like this. The woman saw him. He's like, oh my goodness, you gave me that lollipop. It changed everything in my life. And her whole life took a turn that moment. And it was nothing to him, right? He didn't even know he had influenced her. So hopefully I'm constantly influencing and I just don't know. And they're just taking that goodness out into the world and we're all multipliers for good. But I will tell you about one person and we learn from each other. So I will say she probably gets stuff from me. I get stuff from her for sure. But she's a director and her name is Kelly Kali. And we did a couple films together. The probably most famous is one that's called I'm Fine, Thanks for Asking. And she is a positive influencer. She's a positive leader. And one time I had her on my podcast and she was telling me on the set of her current film that she would go over into the extras in the background people and she would introduce herself and learn their names. This is huge. Like in filmmaking, a director would never go and introduce themselves to the background. It's just unheard of. And so because of that, they felt like they mattered because if you follow the work of Isaac Prolotensky, mattering, everybody has that innate human need to want to add value and be valued, right?
Right.
So usually background or extras are put in a room and they're kind of treated like meat, like, okay, here, we need you now, stand here, walk across the street, look down, carry this briefcase, and not addressed as like humans and appreciated for, we couldn't do a movie without them, right?
Right.
So I said to her, I was like, Kelly, that's what I'm talking about. You made a difference in their life. They're going to carry that forward. Plus, they wanted to perform for you better. And then when you needed something for one of them, you didn't say, hey, you in the red, turn the other way. You were able to say, John, turn the other way. That's everything. And that's so easy. And she was like, hold up, Capella. I agree with you. It was great, but it was not easy. She said,
Mm,
I got 1,000. And she does. Directors have 1 billion people looking at them
right,
for decisions, direction, vision. You have got to be laser focused, right? So
right.
she corrected me quickly. She said, Capella, yes, it was good. And it did have there was an ROI, but it was not easy. So I appreciated that story. So I really respect her. I'm sure she really respects me. I'm sure we get a lot from each other, but that's just one person that came to mind because, in filmmaking and a lot of industries that are sort of that dog eat dog, zero sum game ideologies, we've inherited these broken systems. We don't have to perpetuate them, right? We can cut those ties.
I agree. Yes, definitely. 100%. Oh my God. I am so glad someone said this.
Oh,
Yes, I do agree.
yeah.
It's just people just go on, and I mentioned this in my last episode too. It's like just because someone's been doing it a certain way doesn't mean you would have to continue doing it, even when you know that it's not working out or it's wrong. Yeah, I think people just don't like to think that way. It's because it's tough, it's difficult when someone challenges the way you've been brought up or the way you think, the way your opinions have been formed, your background, your culture, everything. And there's that resistance that forms when they're like, "Oh no, but my mom did it this way, her mom did it that way, so I'm going to do it." Yeah, I completely agree.
Well, that's the difference too between leaders and managers, right? Like managers manage the current system.
Right.
Leaders really look to forge a different path.
I love that. I love it. Okay, so I'm selfish about this question. You manage a lot of things. You have all these projects in front of you. You have the workshop, the podcast, your movies, everything, networking events, all of this. Where do you get that energy from?
It's just because you love what you do, right? And then you're like, oh, it's funny because someone said to me, they're like, you embody this. Like, this is not just research for you. This is not just school or a degree. I'm like, no, this is in my soul. And I said, filmmaking is too, or was too. I was very passionate about being a producer, and they were like, not like this. This comes out of your skin. But if you think back to my story, I started in industrial organizational psychology. Like something
Right.
told me that you're supposed to be in that place to help people work better.
Right, right. I love the way you think, Capella, because at the end of every question, somehow you like to connect it to helping others and being kind. And that says a lot about you as being in this position and with all the success. I think that's awesome. We need more people like you in the world.
And it's so funny though, because like you say, in this position and my success, like to me, I'm still that girl from Detroit. I'm still that person that doesn't even know that sound is not recorded on film. When I produced my first music video, I didn't know that sound wasn't recorded on film. It took a very nice sound guy to say, Capella, producer, woman that should know this. But he never made me feel like that. He said, Capella, film does not record sound, never has, never will. It only records picture. So if you need to record sound, you do it separately and then you sync them, right? He said, but for a music video, we don't record any sound. We do what's called playback. We just run the track and the lyrics and we film it and then in post we put it together. But so my point is I'm supposed to be big bad producer and you know I didn't even know that. But I didn't know that aspect. I knew what was going on, but I didn't know, I guess, the specifics. So I just always hired the right people and they always took care of me. I have one more story. This story I don't tell often. I think I told it once on my podcast, but it's not a story I tell a lot, but I think it's important because it just shows that everything you do impacts others is impacted by others, right? So again, the question is just how.
Right.
So I produced one of my very first ginormous commercials. It was for the Air Force Reserve. It had helicopters. It had aerial cameras. It had underwater cameras. It involved the agency, the client, talent. And there was a scene where this was literally my first one. I was so green. There's already kind of a thing like when you're out of town producer and you come to kind of, they call it a secondary market. Like if it's not LA or New York, it's considered a secondary market, like Baltimore,
Right.
Florida. And so we were filming in Florida and we had to get into a park, a national park, because that's where we were going to launch all of our boats. And park rangers don't play. Like any listener out there, park rangers don't think film is cool. They don't think you're cute. Like park rangers are serious as a heart attack, right? So we had to get into this park. I was able to get permission to get into this park. And then the next morning we all pull up and it's literally a line of like 40 vehicles between the boats, the honey wagons, the caterers, the equipment, the clients, the talent, the agency. It's just like this. It's because it's still dark. You can see the stream of lights, and I'm up front, and I pull up, and it says "Park closed, dusk till dawn,"
Wow.
and I'm
No.
like, and got a gate, and I'm like, I never told this guy what time we were starting. So I was standing there, like literally all these headlights just on me. I was so young. And so somebody comes over to me. He goes, I have bolt cutters. I can cut that chain so we can go in. And so I was like, okay. And then now everybody and their mother knew that was a bad idea, right? That's a bad idea. Like, keep in mind what I said about secondary markets. Usually, people that work in secondary markets, they have sort of an idea or a bias kind of sometimes against people that come in from LA and New York. And a lot of times it's for a good reason. Like they don't treat them well, they pay them slow, because they're in and out. They may never see those people again. So they don't treat them with priority. So I'm standing there and this guy is like about to cut. And then this other guy, this gaffer, a higher up guy, he comes over and he's like, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Let's just open up the catering truck and like have some breakfast. And then maybe by the time breakfast is over, the ranger will be here. And I was like, okay. Because I had no clue. I didn't have any business doing it.
Yeah.
Now, keep in mind, this guy, the gaffer, he knew what was going to happen. If we would have cut that bolt, it would have
Right.
been a show and a half. Like, I would have been arrested, no doubt. And he could have just sit back and ate his popcorn, like, ha ha, fancy northern producer. This is, not how we do it down here. You don't break and entering a federal national park. So we did what he recommended. He came over and he saved my life, literally. And we opened up the catering truck. And so when the park ranger came in, like there was the caterer had opened up like an awning, set out 2 trash cans, and there were a bunch of people eating breakfast burritos. He went bananas on me. He was like, what is this circus? I didn't approve this. If you don't have this cleaned up in 5 minutes, then I'm going to, shut this whole thing down. And all I could think about is if he went bananas over like people standing eating breakfast burritos, I'd absolutely ended up in jail. Like ended up in jail if I had cut that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it only is because of the kindness of that guy. He could have just been a wonderful person that would just like to save everybody. But if I would have went in there like I know everything, wheeling and dealing and, high stepping and everything, he'd have been like, okay, go ahead, cut that chain. But he didn't. He saved me. Like he saved my life literally.
Wow.
And
That
because of
says a
relationships,
lot.
how you treat people.
Yeah, that says a lot. This ties back to what you mentioned in the beginning. Who you are and all your experiences, they count so much, and you carry all those versions of you with you. And people like these, they leave a mark in your head when you meet them, when you experience something with them, and all of these situations, especially people who've helped you get out of certain tricky situations, you remember that. And I think you are doing the exact same thing, Capella, for everybody else with all of your work that you do. I think it's awesome. And I know you keep saying you're still the little girl from Michigan. But to us, to people like us, you are awesome. You are
Oh,
a visionary. And I don't use that word very lightly because I really respect people who have done something valuable and people who don't get things easily or who never got things easily and who've established a certain image of themselves in the society and are actually giving it back. So I think you're awesome, Capella. Your awards, the work, the movies, the stories, the podcast, and you just being you, I think that's just inspiring to say the least. I love the energy that you get in a conversation. It's infectious.
oh, thank you. I
You're
appreciate
awesome.
it.
I do have one last question for you, Capella.
Yeah,
Out
anything.
of all the projects that you've done, again, you don't have to be biased or anything, but out of all the projects that you've done, which one is your favorite and why?
Okay, so does it have to be a film or can it be like any project I've ever done? Okay, it is absolutely my current project, working title. It was always supposed to be this exercise in reflection, connection,
Right,
and perspection, right? And to me, this is an opportunity to dig into your first act and understand, kind of the people around you and revisit, that you used to pick blackberries off of your grandmother's tree. And then what we're doing in the second act and then the third act. Like I always thought it was cool, right? Through the lens of
right,
filmmaking. And then I can kind of wheel and deal some of the cool terms around and people can hear the back behind the scenes. And that's cool. But I did not know the reach of this. And I had one session like a month or two ago, and I called it my friends and family. And I brought in my family and my friends, aunts, uncles, close friends, cousins,
right,
and they get randomly put in rooms. So my father recently passed. And so his brother ended up, my uncle ended up in a room with my brother. So my family's close. Like my
right.
uncle and my brother talk all the time. I wouldn't say all the time, but at least all the holidays. Like, there's no beef or anything. They talk and they like each other and they enjoy each other. And I only give people 4 minutes. You have to go in that room and you have 4 minutes to pitch your movie. And then I called the other person, the studio exec, has to sit and deeply listen. They can't ask any questions. And then you flip it. You play studio exec and the other person has 4 minutes to pitch their movie. So it's only 8 minutes, 4 minutes of talking each.
Right.
People come out in tears with the deepest connections. And my uncle called me afterwards and he was like, I talked to your brother about stuff I've never talked about. I learned things about him I never knew. It happens all the time. Couples might take it and they won't end up in a room together, but when they leave, they're talking about their third act and be like, I had no idea you wanted to spend your third act hiking the Alps, like, and
Oh,
just the amount of connection. And I always thought it was like a project of self-discovery, but I really believe it is a project of connection, which is like so on brand, right?
right. That's awesome. Congratulations. That's
Thank
great
you.
work. I'm definitely going to sign up for it now.
Oh,
I
I
think
love to
it's going
have you.
to help. It's going to help me and the book that I'm writing now, the second one. Cannot wait. That's
Congratulations.
awesome.
Can I
Um,
say something really quick? Because this is hot
Definitely.
off the presses. It has been invited, it and I have been invited to sort of my Mecca, which is the University of Michigan, Ross's School of Business, their Center for Positive Organizations. And they have an annual business conference. It's called the Positive Business Conference. They invited me in working title to present there. And I'm so excited. I'm so proud.
Congratulations.
Thank
Wow.
you. It's mid-May and I'm so proud.
That's so cool. Lovely, lovely, lovely. I know. I said that's the last question, but what would be your biggest suggestion or advice to someone who's starting out in filmmaking without any history or connections, Capella?
It's going to sound lame,
No.
but it is to keep pushing. Don't stop. Keep putting one foot in front of the other. Know that if your product is a script, if you're a producer, a director, an actor, know that your product is good and it is worth being out there and just keep pushing. And when you meet people, treat them kindly, build relationships. And I can't say that enough. If you're at someplace, Sundance, a party, whoever you're talking to, respectful engagement is the name of the game. Look them in their eyes, listen, and build that connection. Don't look over their shoulder to see if there's someone more important you should be speaking to. Be present with the person you're talking to. You never know who you're talking to. Always use the 5-foot rule. Let them know, I'm an actor, I'm a producer. There's nothing wrong with that. Visibility plus credibility equals profitability.
Woo, look at that. Nice.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I am so grateful, Capella, that you agreed to be a guest on our podcast. And it's all these tidbits, I think they're so valuable. And everyone, irrespective of whether they are into filmmaking or not, I think what you shared with us today is so valuable for anybody to just get inspired to do something that they've always wanted to do. I'm running short of words here to describe how I'm feeling right now. But it was so much fun, Capella. Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
on our show and on our podcast. And thank you for all the amazing advice that you gave us and for sharing all of your personal stories and your journey. I am honored, truly. So thank
Oversharing.
you so much. No. But that's what makes us human, right?
Yeah, you're right about that. You are right about that. All right, last thing I will say is that I deeply believe in storytelling. You know that research and psychology and organizational behavior supports that when we are self aware, that we know our stories and we can tell them to ourselves and we can tell them to others, that it makes us more effective leaders, humans, fathers, mothers. We forge stronger relationships. We're able to drive change. Like, it is so important for us to understand our story and own our story to inspire others.
Perfect. 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 Perfect last words for the end of the show. Thank you so much for being on our show, Capella.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot.
Bye, everyone.
I hope you've learned something out of this podcast episode. If you are new here, then I welcome you. Thank you for joining us. You know what to do. Hit the like, comment, subscribe button and keep watching for more stuff. As always, keep growing, keep glowing, and be yourself. This is your host, Sheekha Singh, signing off. Bye.